Good evening. With the news at 6 o'clock, I'm Darren Mara. The federal government has spent the day selling its federal budget, pushing the theme of fairness, a new tax on the major banks, a scheme to assist people buying their first home, and funding for rail projects highlight this year's budget. Also announced was a 0.5% increase in the Medicare levy from mid-2019. It'll cost a person earning $80,000 per year an extra $400 annually, and it's intended to help fund the National Disability Insurance Scheme, the NDIS. Treasurer Scott Morrison says the government is finishing the work the Labor Party started.
All of us have an obligation to our fellow Australians with a disability to ensure that they can enjoy the better standard of life. When it was first set up by the Labor Party, we supported them putting a 0.5% levy on the Medicare levy to pay for the NDIS. The only problem was it didn't fully fund it. Yep. So I wasn't going to say to Australians with a disability, their carers and others, that we were going to leave this $55 billion funding gap over the next 10 years. This ensures that the NDIS is fully paid for.
The federal opposition says it won't stand in the way of some of the federal government's budget measures. It's indicated it approves of the new levy on the nation's 5 biggest banks and won't rule out supporting a 2019 increase of the Medicare levy to 2.5%. But opposition leader Bill Shorten says it's not all above board, with the government still too generous towards the well-off.
The government's looking for some extra money. They don't need to give a tax cut to millionaires on the 1st of July. And they don't need to go ahead with the corporate tax cuts, which are going to cost the budget over $50 billion in the next 10 years. I mean, effectively last night what happened is that Scott Morrison said that every Australian has to pay more tax and that millionaires and multinationals in the future will pay less tax.
Community organisations and charities are accusing the Turnbull government of unfairly targeting the unemployed and homeless for budget savings. A new demerit point system will see welfare recipients punished with reduced payments if they fail to meet their Centrelink obligations. The government will also trial drug testing on 5,000 welfare recipients. St Vincent de Paul Society's chief executive, John Falzon, says punishing the unemployed is unfair when there aren't enough jobs to go around.
To those in the government who pretend that the solution to unemployment lies in putting the boot into the unemployed, allow me to state the bleeding obvious. There's one job for every 10 people looking for work or more work.
Doubt is being cast on the reasons why US President Donald Trump has sacked the director of the FBI, James Comey. Mr. Trump has fired Mr. Comey in a shock move because of his handling of Hillary Clinton's email scandal. But Mr. Trump's Democratic Party opponents are speculating whether there's a political motive relating to the investigation of possible Russian interference in last year's US presidential election benefiting Mr. Trump. Democratic leader in the US Senate, Chuck Schumer, says Mr. Trump has to explain why he chose to sack Mr. Comey now and not before.
The first question the administration has to answer is why now? We know the House is investigating Russian interference in our elections that benefited the Trump campaign. We know the Senate is investigating. We know the FBI has been looking into whether the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians, a very serious offense. Were these investigations getting too close to home for the president?
South Korea's President Moon Jae-in has been sworn in to become the country's new leader. He vowed to immediately tackle the difficult task of addressing rising tensions over North Korea's nuclear ambitions and the risk of rifts with the United States and China. Speaking during his formal oath of office, he also said he'll sincerely negotiate with the US and China over the contentious deployment of an advanced US missile defense system in southern South Korea. Shortly after his victory, Mr. Moon said his win is for all South Koreans.
It is the great victory of great people who have gone through the election together in order to make a just nation, a unified nation, and a nation where principles and common sense work.
And now look at tomorrow's weather. Perth, partly cloudy 22. Adelaide, partly cloudy 20. Melbourne, late shower or two 18. Hobart, showers and 14. Canberra, morning frost and fog 18. Wollongong, partly cloudy and 20. Sydney, also partly cloudy 22. Also partly cloudy in Newcastle 21. In Brisbane, mostly sunny 25. Cairns, a possible shower 28 degrees. And Darwin, sunny and 32. And Greg, there'll be more on those stories coming up on SBS World World News at 6:30.
Okay, thanks Darren. Right across Australia, this is SBS World News Radio, 6:07 now.